So, I guess that's where we end today's episode, with Simon talking about a 3-foot cock. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different, Simon. Kevin addressing me. Kevin writes, did I read it? Welcome to the show. Realistically, am I really big? Oh no. I have a monitor up there and it's just on the wrong screen, which makes it look absolutely massive. My bad, let's get on with it. Realistically, this is the kind of topic that probably belongs on one of these straight fact channels, like Side Projects, sort of a 20 amazing facts video. Kevin, you make Side Projects seem very, very vapid right there. It's fascinating. I like Side Projects. Go check Side Projects out. However, many of these facts are so outrageous they felt they really necessitated on the live cold read reaction style of Brain Blazed. That's what we do here. Introduction to the show. You're welcome. You see, the majority of people don't really enjoy science. Fuck those people, man. Science is awesome. Science makes the world go round.
For science.
I'm sure you'll find that difficult to believe because of your own bias as a science-loving nerd, but the numbers don't lie. I do. I understand when people don't like maths. Because it's I like maths, I like numbers, I see how it works, I think that's pretty cool. But I understand why people don't like it, because it's kind of a pain in the ass. But science, when you take away we're not learning about fucking covalent bonding in GCSE chemistry, which I really didn't enjoy. But to the bigger, interesting bits of cutting edge science, super interesting shit, but apparently everyone hates it. Fuck you. Perhaps the problem is that schools are teaching science all wrong. They usually focus on facts and equations, the boring shit that tends to put students to sleep. But what if there was a better way? Maybe the key to getting students interested in science is to blow their minds with random scientific nonsense that doesn't sound like it could possibly be true. That's what I'm fucking talking about, Kevin. Yes! Then instead of anxiously waiting for class to end, students might spend the next week talking and obsessing about the impossible sounding facts, coercing them into wanting to learn more about science so they can better understand it. I think that'd be cool. It's one of those things where it's would this be cool? Yes. Is it ever going to happen? No. Although now you could just be ChatGPT, teach me about science and make it fucking interesting. If you tell me about covalent bonding, I'm going to lose my shit. I'm sure covalent bonding is super important, but it's just the example of I just remember being bored in chemistry. This phenomenon happened to me recently, and it was the entire impetus for both my wanting to discuss this topic as well as wanting to get your live unfiltered reaction to it, and Kevin's still talking to me. I could use that as a hook to build anticipation throughout the episode, but instead I'm going to start with the fact that I'm shocked I went 42 years without learning.
Let's try that again.
But instead, I'm going to start with the fact that I'm shocked I went 42 years without learning. Shall we also do it today? Whereas I'll tell you whether I know this beforehand or not, and it will expose me as either a scientific genius or the idiot that I am. And I'm not going to lie. Here we go. This video is brought to you by longtime friends of the show, Squarespace. Squarespace is what? Well, it's an all-in-one website platform designed to help you build something real online, whether that's a business, a project, or a mildly obsessive deep dive blog about 14th century torture implements. I mean, you do you. I don't want to talk about what it was, but I'm working on a little bit of a secret project at the moment. And I had to make a new website, and I made it with Squarespace. And it was even easier. I made my personal website with Squarespace years ago, and then I made this new one. And I was like, oh, they've made it even easier. They've got all this AI stuff that puts everything in the right place. I have no design skills. I am utterly design incompetent, which is funny because my wife is actually a designer. And I'm I don't know what I'm doing. But Squarespace, I made this website, and it's just wow, it looks pretty. You add your own pictures, you add your own text, and it's boom, done, beautiful. I don't even know how. I mean, I do know how. It's because Squarespace are really good. They make up for my failings as a human. It's called the Blueprint AI Builder. They say that to me right here, so that's what it's called. I didn't quite pick up on that when I was using it, but it's super easy. You just answer a few questions, spins up a site that actually looks like the thing you're looking to make. Also, they got email campaigns that are built right in. You can design and send professional-looking emails, automate stuff, schedule blasts, all integrated. And if you're selling anything or offering exclusive content, you can gate it behind a paywall, charge subscriptions, and run the whole thing from one dashboard. So head to squarespace.com/blaze for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the code BLAZE to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. And now back to today's episode. All gold is from space. Well, I guess that depends. The Earth is in space, so I mean, maybe, but I don't think that's what Kevin's getting at. Gold has been mined from the veins deep in the Earth's crust for thousands of years. The logical assumption is that just like with diamonds, emeralds, and rubies, that gold buried within the Earth was formed as the result of some sort of geological process. I did think this, Kevin, and I get the feeling I'm wrong. It turns out, though, that this isn't the case, and all gold is extraterrestrial in origin. Holy shit, did all gold really come to Earth just by, like, asteroids and shit? I fucking love science. It's so fucking cool. I'm 38 as of 3 days ago.
1, 2, 3, 4. Happy birthday from all of us to you. We wish it was our birthday so we could party too.
And I didn't know this, and I'm learning something new and basic and cool. Science is fucking awesome. And it just is. But none of it originated on Earth. Geological processes caused it to shift around and consolidate into veins, but none of it originated on Earth. While alchemists wasted centuries trying to turn lead into gold, it turns out that the ancient Egyptians and Aztecs had accidentally stumbled upon something pretty close to the true origin of gold. Now, I'm being pretty liberal in my use of the word close here, but their religious mysticism was still closer than the ideas of science-minded alchemists. The Aztecs believed that gold was the sweat of the sun god. Jesus Christ, Aztecs. I will look up the pronunciation of these things, and I still won't be able to say it afterwards, even if they have it in my pronunciation dictionary, which is not that likely. Huitzilopochtli. I know it's wrong. Let's just call him Big H. And the Egyptians believed it to be the skin of the sun god Ra. Well done, Egyptians. Easy to pronounce. R-A. Ra. Huitzilopochtli, Big H. And as it turns out, gold can only be made as a result of either a supernova or a collision between two neutron stars, which is fucking cool. It's so fucking cool. This collision between two neutron stars. Fucking cool. As a quick rundown on how stars work, by the way, if you're listening to this, I'm just pointing at my watch, which is made out of a collision between two neutron stars or a supernova. Sorry, I'm going to stop getting excited and banging on about how science is cool, and I'm just going to do the video. Let's carry on, because it's going to get repetitive. This is a long, epic episode. A quick rundown on how stars work for anyone who doesn't remember. Stars begin as giant balls of hydrogen. Over time, the hydrogen atoms undergo fusion to create helium, releasing massive amounts of energy in the process. This helium will then fuse into carbon and oxygen, and so on. However, the heaviest element a star can produce is iron. To perform nuclear fusion on iron, it would take more energy than it releases, so the process can no longer continue. Not every star is even big enough to fuse iron in the first place, but those that do eventually collapse in on themselves, resulting in a supernova. So, all elements in the universe that are heavier than iron can only be created as the result of these supernovae? Supernovas?
Both is good.
All the gold on Earth, as well as all the silver, uranium, tungsten, whatever else you might want, only arrived here as a result of exploding stars. Realistically, this shouldn't have been as much of a surprise to me as it was. Matter cannot be created or destroyed, so all the atoms on Earth were either here when it was originally formed from a cloud of space dust, or crashed here from space. Yeah, I mean, I did know that. I didn't know, I kind of just assumed that there was gold in the Earth from that dust and shit that came together, not from, like, crashing meteors and stuff. And while there are lots of geological and biological processes that manipulate and reorganize these atoms, the atoms themselves are generally unchanged. It's easy to lose track of this because the entire world is run on chemical interactions. But when your body converts glucose into carbon dioxide and water, you're using the same hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon atoms that were already there. You're just rearranging them into different molecules. Okay, I didn't know the thing about gold, but all of this I definitely know.
You have a remarkable brain.
Even if humans were to someday master nuclear fusion, we're still only fusing hydrogen into helium. There is no way for us to ever create gold in meaningful quantities, so the only way we'll ever increase the supply of gold, uranium, or anything else for that matter is to mine it from space or to have meteors carrying it crash into the Earth. The Andromeda paradox. Is this the one about it moving away or something? Or I feel I might know this one. I've heard of this. On a whim, I decided to take a trip to Prague just for fun. What? Wait, and you didn't tell me, Kevster?
Twist! Big twist!
I was walking around on what I assume was a typical evening, having no real basis for comparison, when I suddenly locked eyes with none other than Factboy himself. This is not true. I also wouldn't recognize Kevin. Like, I can't do the faces very well. Like, I struggle with that. I'll be like, that looks like Kevin, but there's no way. There's no way he's here. I need context. And I'll just be like, all right. And then Kevin be like, fucking rude. And I'll be like, what are you doing here, Kevin? There's no way. How would you expect me to recognize you? We both blushed, then not wanting to turn this chance encounter into something more awkward, we both diverted our eyes in the direction of the Andromeda galaxy as we walked past one another. I know this sounds like the beginning of either a romantic comedy or a piece of Reddit fanfiction. Oh my God. Reddit fanfiction, fucking weird, bro. But hear me out for a moment. Oh yes, and in this scenario, we also both have magical superhuman hearing and vision that allows us to accurately perceive events that are taking place 2.5 million light years away. I have that, Kevin. You don't have that? Doesn't everyone have that? That's the most important part of this. I happened to be walking towards Andromeda at the time. I looked up and I saw a group of alien space admirals debating whether or not to launch a full-scale invasion of Earth. Simon, who was walking away from Andromeda, saw the alien fleet already leaving Andromeda on a seek and destroy mission. Ooh, wait, maybe I don't know this. This is known as the Andromeda paradox, and it is one of those things that is referred to as a paradox because it goes against our intuitive way of thinking. Yeah, how can these things be happening at the same time? That doesn't make sense. It takes the light from Andromeda 2.5 million years to reach Earth, so logically, anyone looking at it from Earth simultaneously would see the same thing. And in this scenario, Simon and I were standing in effectively the same location when we looked up. Despite being in the same place at the same time, we each witnessed events in the present moment that took place days or possibly even weeks apart in Andromeda. Is this something to do because light can travel at different speeds through different mediums, right? So could this be about sunlight taking longer to get there so we're seeing different things? Because that would kind of make sense. I wonder if I've devised this. I haven't heard of this before. So how in the fuck is this possible? Well, relativity, no further questions, thank you very much. No, we're going to get an answer. It's related to something called the relativity of simultaneity. Basically, if two things don't happen in the exact same place, it's impossible to say whether or not they happen simultaneously in an absolute sense. Kevin, I hope you're going to explain that further because that went over my head. An old example used to demonstrate this involves a train and a platform. Oh, the observer thing. Was this Albert Einstein? Let's say Simon is standing in the exact center of a long train car. I'm standing on the train platform, and I'm a giant arsehole, so I toss a flashbang into the car that goes off at the exact moment Simon and I pass one another. Thanks, Kevin, you dick. Because the two ends of the train car would be at equal fixed distances from Simon and the center of the car, he would see the light hit the front and the back of the train car at the exact same time. So far, I'm bullying you, Kevster, or at least he would if I hadn't just rendered him temporarily blind and deaf. But the speed of light is the same in all directions for all observers, so that's not what I see at all. From my perspective, the back of the train car would be moving closer to the light source, and the front of the car would be moving away from it, so the light would hit the back car first. Following again, okay. It's not like I would be able to perceive this discrepancy because it would all happen so fast, but the events Simon saw as simultaneous would appear to happen sequentially relative to my perspective. Basically, time gets really weird when you introduce motion. It's related. And even weirder when you introduce distance. Even though Simon and I were walking past one another at a slow, lingering pace, that speed in opposite directions, combined with the massive distance between Earth and Andromeda, can result in radically different ideas of what the present actually is.
My brain hurts!
This is super fucking weird. I also am surprised I haven't heard of this before. It's really cool. It raises an interesting question though. In my present moment, I saw aliens merely debating whether or not to invade Earth, whereas Simon saw them en route to kill us all. Does that mean that in my present, the future was already fixed and predetermined? Even though I saw the aliens debating, was it already an inevitability that they would launch an invasion of Earth? I feel like the answer's yes, because I've just seen something that Kevin didn't see. Just because Kevin didn't see it yet doesn't mean it's not gonna happen. Just is free will a thing? I have no fucking idea. Kevin doesn't. I know the answer, Kevin. Figured it out in about 4 seconds, Kevin. And that's not really my problem. Even though we were able to witness these events using magic powers of perception, the aliens would still have to travel 2.5 million light years to attack us. That means it would be a problem for future generations to sort out. Oh my god, future species? We're going to be around in 2.5 million years? In like our current forms? I mean, definitely not in our current forms.
Moisturize me, moisturize me.
But it's the sort of mind-bending weirdness that might make kids really want to learn more about physics in school to try and understand what was going on, or it might melt their brains and make them turn to drugs to forget they learned this in the first place.
I choose drugs!
Yes, I suppose I could go watch some videos or read some things about this, or I could just go smoke some crack. Sloths versus dolphins. And now for something completely different, sloths. Sloths are stupid and pointless. These animals are known for being extremely slow moving, with their average speed being only 0.15 to 0.5 miles an hour. They're so slow the predators can't even see them move.
Old MacDonald had a deformed farm, E-I-E-I-O. And on this farm he had a hyperactive sloth, E-I-E-I-O. With a...
Those predators need to get their shit together. You're not a very good predator if you can't see slow-moving things. I can see slow-moving things. I'm a fucking apex predator, bro. That's why we're the kings. They're also one of the few animals that starve to death when their stomach is full, as their extremely slow metabolism means it can take a full month for a sloth to digest a single leaf. If their stomach fails to extract enough nutrients from food they eat fast enough, even if their stomach is full, a sloth will starve to death. How are these fuckers still around? There's only one thing I can see as possibly being beneficial about sloths, and that's how it would potentially benefit female sloths. Alright then. As it turns out though, my instinct on that one was wrong, just by, oh, I see. I'm too slow, I get it. Because they'd be good in bed! Yes! Boom! Everyone got that immediately, Simon, you didn't need to explain it. There's no coffee in here, it's disappointing. I'll put that back. Despite doing everything as slowly as you could possibly imagine, sloths still manage to finish having sex in under a minute, usually only 5 to 30 seconds. I'm sorry, female sloths. There's no benefits at all to being a sloth of any kind. I realise that happens to conserve energy because of their slow metabolism, but if the sex isn't even long enough for her to fake an orgasm, you are doing it wrong. Of course, while I may personally think sloths are wretched abominations that have no reason to exist, nature apparently disagrees with me, right? Somehow. Two-toed sloths and three-toed sloths aren't actually closely related. They're instead the result of convergent evolution. That means that there were two completely different times throughout history when sloth-like traits not only evolved, but provided a competitive advantage over other species. Like fucking what? Compare that with dolphins, who are basically the humans of the sea. They're intelligent, playful, and they have sex just for fun and to form social bonds rather than exclusively for procreating. Fucking dolphins, man. Yes! And if the male dolphin fails to satisfy a female, well, dolphins are no strangers to taking care of business themselves. They can also reach speeds of nearly 40 miles per hour, which isn't overly important for what we're talking about. I just wanted to mention it's almost 40 times the speed of a sloth in a full-on sprint. Yeah, dolphins are fucking cool as well. I like dolphins. But there is one area where sloths actually outperform dolphins. Okay, there are a couple of areas, but nobody expects a dolphin to climb a tree. I'm imagining a dolphin climb a tree now. Whoever's editing this, make that AI shit. Make a picture of a dolphin climbing a tree.
Do I have to?
What a wonderful world we live in where that could be something you could look at. Despite the fact that dolphins live in the ocean and hunt underwater, sloths can hold their breath significantly longer than dolphins can. What? Really? Why? Why is that necessary? They live outside. How's that an evolutionary advantage? Why did that evolve? A dolphin can only hold its breath for 8 to 10 minutes, while sloths can hold their breath for up to 40 minutes. This is thanks to their ability to slow their metabolism even lower than it normally is, cutting their heart rate by 2/3. That means they need much less oxygen and can thus hold their breath surprisingly long. They do this while swimming, as sloths are able to swim 3 times faster than they move on land. Unfortunately for them, 3 times 0 is still 0, so this isn't terribly impressive. Still, the idea that some tree-dwelling mammal is more equipped to hold its breath for extended periods than a creature that spends its entire life in the ocean is more than a little surprising. Indeed it is. I still don't understand why sloths are a thing. Fax machine predates the telephone. Kevin, I'm very impressed. I have made a lot of videos about a lot of different things, and I have to say I kind of started this expecting it to be how I normally do when I do one of these big videos, where it's like, yeah, know that one, know that one, know that one, ooh, a new one, know that one, know that one, know that one, know that one, oh, a new one. But all of these I don't know so far. Bravo! I feel like there is some portion of our audience that is too young to even know what a fax machine is.
Damn kids.
I've looked at the analytics, there definitely are. Hello, friends. Sure, they still exist, but who the hell even uses them anymore? For anyone unaware, fax machines basically work the same way that dial-up modems did. One fax machine would scan an image, convert that image into digital code, and then send it over phone lines to another fax machine, which would use the digital code to reproduce the image. But despite fax machines having been associated with phone lines for my entire lifetime and beyond, the fax machine actually predates the invention of the telephone. In fact, there were multiple different precursors to the modern fax machine that were all invented before the telephone was. Of course, this was a natural next step to take. By the 1840s, the telegraph had been around for decades, and it gave people the ability to communicate over long distances by sending messages in Morse code. With one means of transmission already developed, logically the next thing was to try and transmit either sounds or images. And apparently images were easier because that's what was invented first. I had no idea. I assumed the boop, 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 boop was quite easy to change into like a more dynamic frequency. But apparently it's images. The first experimental fax machine was created by I just saw the year on this, by Scottish inventor Alexander Bain in 1842. And in 1848, English physicist Frederick Bakewell created the first fax machine that did not totally suck. It still kind of sucks and never became commercially viable, but it was a big step up from Bain's version. Also, the way it worked was really clever. Bakewell's fax machine worked using a rotating tube and metal foil. The sender would use a special insulating ink to write their message or draw an image on the foil. The foil was then wrapped around the cylinder and a metal stylus would drag across the foil as it rotated. The stylus touching metal was creating an electric signal that broadcast like a telegraph, but whenever it came into contact with the ink, the signal would be interrupted. People in the past, I mean, you're like, people, you know, we invent cool shit today. This was like 200 years ago. It's really fucking clever. I know I shouldn't be surprised by that, but this is really clever. On the receiving end, an identical machine would run a stylus across chemically treated paper with the electric signal interacting with the paper to recreate the image that was being scanned. Again, this is really clever, but it required that the cylinders be rotating perfectly in sync and for the stylus to start at the exact same point on both machines. Which honestly, considering how cool this is, not too big of an ask. It was usable, but it required too much precision and coordination in operating to ever catch on. The first higher quality fax machine came in 1861! I was going to be like, oh, so then they forgot about it for like 150 years until they could do it properly. No, not long, way before the telephone. Which was still 15 years before Graham Bell received his patent for the telephone. This version was created by the Italian priest Giovanni Caselli, and it could transmit both handwritten notes and photographs. 19th century, guys. Now, when I was coming up with topics for this episode, I specifically wanted to avoid weird time stuff as much as possible. People always bring up that Cleopatra lived closer to the invention of the iPhone. Oh, I always heard the one about Pizza Hut than the construction of the pyramids. But stuff like that, whilst neat, isn't overly interesting or shocking. Yeah, we're all tired out on it because it's been done so many times before. Most importantly, there's not really anything to talk about with stuff like that, so it'd be a boring episode. That said, there is one such statement I need to make with regards to the surprisingly early invention of the fax machine. Japan officially abolished the samurai class in the late 1800s, which means that there was a brief period of time where a samurai could have sent a fax to Abraham Lincoln. It's so cool. It's very cool, Kevin. I'm glad you included that. Arseload, buttload, and shitload are real units of measurement. There are a lot of vulgar sounding words that people assume are just made up by immature people looking for a laugh. I did know that buttload is a real measurement. It was something to do with like as a water butt or a, it's like a barrel. But I didn't know the other ones. A shitload, huh? For example, when the great Cornelio needed TP for his bunghole, I assumed it was just sophomoric nonsense designed to entertain children like me. However, when my school took field trips to Salem, which was basically every October, the school buses would always pass a little store in Peabody called Bunghole Liquors. Bunghole? Really?
Keep it professional!
And we would all laugh about it like idiots. I'll still laugh about it. I'm 38 years old. We were then informed that a bunghole was the hole used to fill or empty a cask. Much like a bunghole, the words arseload, buttload, and shitload all have real meanings as well. While these words are all used relatively interchangeably in modern society, generally to denote some arbitrarily large quantity of something, they are actually very specific units of measurement. We just use milliliters like normal people, Americans. It's like, I got shitloads of this. It's like, what are you talking about? Just tell me how many milliliters, liters, or not gallons. What's the 1,000 liters? Is it a kiloliter? A megaliter? The earliest known reference to an arseload is in the Bible, which makes sense. After all, an arseload was literally the maximum carrying capacity of an ass or a donkey. So I guess it would be assload. Ass. Obviously, they didn't use the English word arseload, but the Hebrew word Homer? I don't know, literally, which translates to arseload. As for how much that represents, there are different estimates. One Homer, I'm gonna go for. Was how many bushels of dry goods that ass could carry, but different dry goods weigh different amounts per bushel. The most common estimate I've seen is that one arseload is about equivalent to 8 bushels, or about 480 pounds. Kevin, this means nothing to me. How many kilograms is that, Kevin? I think it's about 250. That's a guess. It's quite a lot. You can fit 250 kilograms on an ass. A buttload was much more straightforward. One buttload is equal to exactly 2 hogsheads. Well, that explains it. Moving on. Since we're all on the same page with that one, I'm sure we can safely move on. Kevin and I, same page. What, Simon? You don't know what a hogshead is? I know, Kevin. Disappointing, isn't it? A hogshead was the amount of liquid that would fit into a large cask. So this, again, was a somewhat variable unit of measurement. Even once they were standardized, a hogshead of wine was 63 gallons. Holy shit! That's a fucking big hogshead. While a hogshead of ale was 54 gallons. A buttload is twice that. So if someone ever tells you that they drank a buttload of ale last night, that means they drank 108 gallons. There's no 400 litres. That means that whoever told you that is either a liar or a ghost. That brings us up to a shitload, which absolutely eclipses these 2 other units of measurement. Also, while the other 2 units were definitively real, though a buttload was more likely to just be referred to as a butt, I'm not fully convinced that this one actually was. It's possible that this was just comedic revisionist history and never been able to confirm it one way or another. That said, the term shitload allegedly originates on the docks of Boston, where it was used to refer to the carrying capacity of a sewage or garbage scow. Scow? Is that like some sort of old boat which takes garbage away? Which was 2.7 tons. Even if this was true, though, the meanings of these units of measurement have been rendered irrelevant in the modern age, leaving only their colloquial usage. Other bizarre units of measurement include a Mickey, where 1 Mickey is equal to the smallest distance a computer mouse can move on the screen. That's much more modern and specific, like a Megadeth.
Hello, me. Meet the real me and my misfits way of life.
There's a Megadeth, which is equal to 1 million people killed in a nuclear explosion, and a Helen, which is a unit of measurement for beauty. Oh, like Helen of Troy, is it? That one even gets subdivided with 1 millihelen, equal to the amount of beauty required to launch a single ship. Magenta isn't real. Sort of. This is one of those, I've seen videos about this on YouTube and I've just assumed it's like clickbait. Or no, it's not clickbait. I assume magenta's not real because colors aren't really real, are they? It's just about the reason this is blue is not because it's blue, it's because, you guys can't see that, I got a little blue disc here. Because it's the only color that it reflects is blue and all of the other wavelengths of color are absorbed, right? Something like that. Believe it or not, magenta isn't a real color. Tell that to the people who sell me the fucking magenta printer ink, Kevin. At least not in the way we traditionally perceive colours. To humans, colours are generally defined as the things on the visible spectrum of light. To a mantis shrimp, that extends further and includes the ability to visualise colours in the ultraviolet and possibly infrared range, though fucked if we have any idea what those colours would look like. I look forward to the day where they could be like, oh cool, let's CRISPR someone. Let's take that gene from that, what was it? A manta fish? Manta ray? Some shit like that? And put that in a human and then they'll be able to perceive new colours. I know that's not how it works, but it'd be cool. Maybe it is how it works. It sounds way too simple. To visualize colors, light waves are picked up by 3 different types of cones in our eyes. We label these as red, green, and blue cones, though they're actually detecting long, medium, or short wavelengths of light. Obviously, we can see more than 3 colors though, so how does that work with only 3 types of cones? Well, fortunately, there's some overlap between the wavelengths these cones detect. If the wavelength of light stimulates both the red and green cone identically, you would see yellow. If it stimulates the red cone a lot and the green cone a little, you see orange. However, there's actually a way to trick our brains. If our eyes detect both a red and a green wavelength from the same location, we will see that as yellow, even though it was not actually yellow light being emitted. Oh, there you go. This is the entire basis of how colour TVs and computer monitors work. Our screen resolutions have gotten way too big for you to easily see this, but back in the day, if you got real close to a TV, you could see that each pixel contained a red, green, and blue light emitter side by side. Yeah, if you use a microscope on a screen, you'll still see this. It's really cool. I feel like I did this as a kid. By firing 2 different wavelengths of light, our brains can be tricked to combine them into a single color. And this is exactly how our brains create magenta. Magenta does not exist as a color in the visible spectrum of light. Instead, it's what happens when both the red and blue cones in our eyes are stimulated at the same time. Even though it is impossible for a single wave to stimulate those 2 cones while excluding the green cone, our brains still combine the signal into a single color instead of trying to see the 2 colors separately. It's fucking weird that the world is different to how we perceive it. Like, shit is different colors aren't real, blah, 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 and it's like, it seems pretty real. And then you're like, oh yeah, no, the brain and the eyes, they're not perfect. There's all this other shit going on. Like, can't robins see, like, electromagnetism and shit? Fucking robins, man, that'd be cool. This is what's known as a non-spectral color, and magenta isn't unique in this regard. Colors like white, black, and gray are also non-spectral colors, as are any colors resulting from combining a spectral color and a non-spectral color. So if you mix magenta with something, it's still, like, not real. So spectral red plus non-spectral white equals non-spectral pink. That's not to say that magenta is entirely fictitious or anything, as the color does occur in nature. There are magenta flowers, which we perceive as such because the pigment in the flowers reflects red and blue light back at our eyes while absorbing green light. But even though the color exists in nature, it arguably isn't a real color, as it can only be created by combining multiple waves of light rather than existing on its own. I mean, then you gotta ask, like, well, what is real? Like, what is real? I feel like reality is perception. Perception is reality. Isn't that like what people say?
I reject your reality and substitute my own.
At this point, you might be asking, well, that sure is interesting, Simon, but is there any practical use for this information? And to that I say, probably not. If we hadn't already invented color TV, then this could be a major breakthrough towards making this happen, but I'm not sure what other practical application it could possibly have. Lemons don't exist in nature.
This is true?
Really? Wait, is this like bananas and stuff? Because bananas are all like clones or something, right? There's an old saying about when life gives you lemons, but that's not actually a thing that ever happened. At no point did life give humans lemons, because they aren't a naturally occurring plant. Lemons have existed since at least the first millennium BC, but they didn't just evolve on their own. They're a hybrid of the citron and bitter orange. And this hybridization was done by humans instead of occurring naturally. Holy shit, ancient people made lemons from nothing. Lemons are awesome. Like, slice a lemon in a Coke? Mwah! But it doesn't stop there, because bitter oranges weren't naturally occurring either. Those were man-made hybrids of the pomelo and the mandarin. Again, Kevin, really impresses me that you've come up with another thing that I didn't know. I love oranges. Pomelos are kind of weird. Mandarins are very variable in quality. Oranges, often perfect. In fact, think of all the citrus fruits that you know: lemons, limes, oranges, grapefruit, tangelo, and so on. Yeah, you sure, Kevin? I know the tangelo. None of these fruits just chanced into existence. They were all engineered by humans. There are 4 ancestral citrus fruits: citron, mandarin, pomelo, and papeda. No, this is so cool. Science is cool, I'm telling you!
Science, yeah!
Some people include kumquats as well, though others argue those aren't actually citrus and are just a closely related species. Regardless, every other citrus fruit that you know and love was man-made. On the bright side, next time someone tries to complain to you about the supposed dangers of GMO foods, oh god, those people, you can remind them that all of their favorite citrus fruits could be considered GMOs, since they only exist thanks to human intervention. Yes! Fucking GMO, anti-GMO people, anti-GMO products like no GMO, it's just marketing. Stop complaining. You can't touch anything.
Can't touch this.
I know this one. I'm sure that this seems extremely counterintuitive because you perceive yourself as touching things all the time. Simon is touching this script. Not really, Kevin. You thinking of a different channel? Am I recording this on the right channel, Kevin? Simon is touching the script. You're all probably touching your phones or computers while you watch this, and I touched your mother last night. Jesus, Kevin.
Mom, you are not smart. I don't tell yo mama's so dumb jokes. I tell my mama's so dumb jokes. Example, my mama's so dumb, I don't tell yo mama's so dumb jokes. I tell my mama's so dumb jokes.
But are we actually coming into physical contact with these things? In the colloquial sense, sure. When you say you touch something, people know what you mean, and that's good enough for human communication, even if it isn't technically precise. I do know this one, but I'm just trying to guess if I can remember the thing about it. It's like, if you actually touch something, then you'd bond with it, right? So it's always like there's that force keeping you just enough away. Otherwise, you'd be like, oh, now I'm part of a desk. Fuck! However, the matter making up your body will never come into contact with matter making up anything else when we get down to the atomic scale. Everything is made up of atoms, which are little balls of protons and neutrons surrounded by electrons orbiting them like a solar system. And most of these atoms are empty space because the orbits of the electrons are massive relative to the size of the nucleus. And because all electrons are negatively charged, they repel one another. And this means that when you attempt to touch something, the outer electrons in your atoms will approach the outer electrons in that thing's atoms, and they will push each other away. Told you. The sensation of touch you feel is actually the repulsive electromagnetic force that is preventing you from physically making contact with this thing. Now, is this just all overly pedantic nonsense? Well, from a practical standpoint, yeah, of course it fucking is. If you get arrested for murder and try to explain that you didn't stab someone, the electromagnetic forces of the knife merely overcame the structural integrity of their skin, causing you to deform and break it, you're definitely going to prison.
He had it coming. He had it coming. He only had himself to blame.
If you get caught. That said, this is still important for advanced science, and there's also some interesting side effects of this knowledge. For example, people have been asking for hoverboards for decades, but guess what? Every skateboard, technically a hoverboard, since the atoms of the wheels are never coming into contact with the ground. Yeah, it's still disappointing though, isn't it? In fact, you're never even sitting on your chair, you're floating above it. Kind of cool. Science is cool. I'm going to stop. To anybody that wants a hoverboard, I know that sounds like a stupid cop-out, but for the record, hoverboards are stupid anyway. Without the friction generated by being on the ground, a hoverboard would have no way to accelerate, brake, or steer. So if this brief foray into atomic physics was too much for any of you, all you need to remember is that hoverboards are stupid and MC Hammer was right all along. Can't touch this. Took me a minute, but I got there. You can taste garlic with your feet. Another one I don't know. Let's take a break from the sort of pedantic bullshit I find interesting for a moment so I can share with you a bizarre fact that is broadly accurate at face value. You can taste garlic with your feet. In fact, if you're watching this at home and happen to have spare garlic around, you can even try this for yourself.
Oh, I can't do that. Nope, not gonna happen.
I'm at the office, I don't have garlic. And experience the magic of science before this video is over. Obviously, your feet don't have secret magical taste buds, so you aren't going to taste the garlic in your feet. Otherwise, they'd be tasting the inside of my shoes all the time, which would be horrible. But you will taste it in your mouth. You just have to make sure you do it right, as I've seen people complaining online that this trick doesn't work after they fucked up the incredibly simple instructions. It is the internet. People fuck up incredibly simple stuff all the time. I do it as well. To start, take an ordinary garlic clove. It helps to cut it in half, but that's not technically necessary. Next, crush the garlic with your foot like you're making a video for OnlyFans. It is extremely important that you crush up the garlic with your foot, as it won't work if you just rub a whole garlic clove against your foot. And that is it. That's all the instructions. All that's left is to wait. While it isn't necessary, some sources recommend that you put the garlic in a trash bag after slicing it in half,
I'm having a stroke up here.
After slicing it in half and while you step on it. This is largely just to keep as much of the garlic scent trapped inside the bag as possible for your own peace of mind, so that once you notice the effects, you can be sure it isn't being caused by ambient garlic in the air. That's immediately what I would think it is. Either way, you should begin to taste and smell the garlic anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour after doing this. So what the actual fuck is happening here? I think it's something to do with why you can taste garlic in your mouth even ages after eating garlic, right? Because it doesn't enter your bloodstream and stuff, and that's why like having a mint doesn't get rid of it. Like you have to keep having mints. Well, to start with, the scent associated with garlic is actually its defense mechanism. When a piece of garlic suffers tissue damage, the enzyme allinase turns the compound allin into allicin. Allicin is responsible for the strong scent and thus the taste of garlic. Because of its particular chemical makeup and the fact that allicin molecules are comparatively small, they are able to permeate the skin and enter the bloodstream through your feet. This would probably work with other parts of your body as well, but the feet have a lot of sweat glands and blood vessels really close to the skin, so they are an ideal location for absorbing the allicin. Once in the bloodstream, the allicin breaks down into a few other compounds. These are the compounds that would typically be present when you eat garlic, as allicin is extremely unstable and breaks down quickly after garlic is initially cut. The resulting compounds then get removed from your bloodstream either by breathing them out or as excreting them through your salivary glands. Now, obviously, there isn't going to be that much of these compounds that got absorbed by your feet, but it really doesn't take much. Allicin and the things it breaks down into all contain sulfur, and the human body is far more sensitive to the smell of sulfur than most other things. We can detect very small amounts of it, so even the tiny amounts of sulfur containing compounds that are exhaled or dropped into your mouth through your salivary glands are enough to make you smell and taste garlic. It's really cool. And if anybody at home did this, let me know in the comments at what point in the episode you started to taste the garlic, because I saw different numbers for how long it takes, and I'm really curious. Let us know. Let's do some science!
Science, yeah!
Domesticated dogs evolved to manipulate humans. I know this one, and cats as well. Cats don't meow, like, at each other. They just meow at us, for us to give them shit. And I guess dogs do something similar. What do dogs do? They wag their tails. They look at you all like, oh. Have you ever seen a dog look at you with those big puppy eyes and thought, oh, how could I say no to that adorable face? As it turns out, your mind is weak and you're playing directly into their hands.
Paws. Dogs have paws.
A number of domesticated animals have been bred for traits that make them interact better with humans. For the most part, this has been focused on breeding animals that were more docile. However, dogs took it a step further and evolved a trait specifically to interact with humans without being bred for it. That trait was eye muscles. There are two muscles in dogs that appear to have evolved because of being domesticated by humans: the levator anguli oculi medialis, or LAOM, and the retractor anguli oculi lateralis, or RAOL. The LAOM is a Jesus Christ, that sentence. Is a muscle that allows dogs to raise their inner eyebrow, making their eyes appear bigger and making it look like they're sad. The RAOL is located at the outer corner of the eye, and it can help show expressions like calmness or fear. However, the LAOM is entirely absent from wolves. Wolves are fucking scary. There's no such thing as a sad wolf.
What's it mean?
Bad wolf.
From which domesticated dog breeds evolved. There are some tiny muscle fibers in that area, but they don't actually do anything. It also isn't present in Siberian Huskies, which are far closer to wolves and ancient dogs than other modern dog breeds. The RAOL is more variable and does exist to some extent in grey wolves, though it is far less expressive. It was also absent from Siberian Huskies. Fucking Siberian Huskies, they're not getting any treats. The important thing to remember, though, is that evolution does not have a goal. While it's nice to think that dogs evolved to better communicate their emotions with their human masters, that's simply not how it works. Traits evolve randomly, and ones that provide a competitive advantage get passed on because the animals that possess those traits outlive, outbreed, or otherwise outcompete the rest of their species. That means that puppy dog eyes provided a competitive advantage, as humans were more likely to adopt and care for dogs that they saw as adorable. So why do we have huskies? Why are there Siberian Huskies around? It's because they look cool. It may have been random chance, but the effective result is that dogs evolved such that they could manipulate people by appearing far more adorable than they really are through the use of exaggerated facial expressions. Interestingly, though, the evolution of the LAOM only furthers my belief that cats are better than dogs. Dogs are capable of more facial movements than cats, with that inner eyebrow muscle being one dogs possess and cats don't. However, despite having more possible movements, dogs are only believed to be capable of 30 to 40 different facial expressions. These are big, exaggerated expressions that humans are easily able to recognize and understand, but it's still a relatively small number. Cats, on the other hand, holy shit, are capable of 276 distinct facial expressions? The differences between these expressions are often subtle, and few humans can identify them. Can you imagine meeting the guy? It's like, so what do you do? It's like, I'm a cat facial expression expert. What would you use that for?
In my career, I've worked with thousands of cats, one-on-one, analyzing their behaviors and retraining them and their guardians.
They're primarily used for communication with other cats, presumably as ways to discuss how to further enslave humanity.
Indubitably.
7 people control the keys to the internet. At times, it really feels like the internet has a life of its own, and according to the dead internet theory, kinda does. It's dead internet theories where there's like some people who believe that there's nothing really going on the internet, it's all just fake. It's not, it's real. I'm here. Hello.
He has a clone.
Instead of the early days when the internet was just a place to very slowly look at porn and argue with other nerds about Star Trek, now the internet is filled with AI chatbots arguing political talking points with one another on Twitter. The internet is such a massive and complex thing, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that it is all just a framework for remote communication of devices. And as such, that means somebody needs to be in charge of running all the things that make the internet possible. There are multiple groups responsible for various facets of the internet, but among them is ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. Is that the people who sell you like www.simon.com? Great example there. And within ICANN is a group of 14 volunteers from around the world, the 14 people who control the 7 keys to the internet. Unfortunately, despite such a cool-sounding job, there really isn't anything to it, at least not if everything is functioning properly. Every 3 months, there's a ceremony where the key holders travel to a secure ICANN location with their keys. However, the keys they hold aren't actually the keys to the internet, they're the keys to the boxes within ICANN's extremely secure facility that contains 7 cards which combine Voltron style to form the single key to the internet. This is not fucking real, is it? Or at least to one specific part of it. At the ceremony, what is going on? The key holders use their keys to retrieve the cards, put them into a computer, and enter a single line of code to renew them for the next 3 months, which is neat. But why is any of this fascinating? Well, a big part of this is that most articles about the topic dramatically overstate how cool and important the whole thing is. They make it sound like these 7 people have the ability to sort of turn off or reboot the internet, which is just not a thing. It honestly should be, because it would probably be better off as a society if the internet could just start over from scratch. But that's not what ICANN's key holders for. Can you imagine going back to like news groups? Like early internet. One of my first memories of the internet was a dude at school asking me, because I think I don't know. I think I had a computer at home. Everyone had a computer at home. And he was like, dude, how do I look up Grand Theft Auto cheats? Do I just type it into the address bar? And I'm like, no, dude. You have to like go to the website. Of course, now you do just type it into the address bar. But this was, I don't know, I was 14. So it's a good 20-something years ago. As I said, ICANN is in charge of a specific function of the internet, which is the domain name system, or DNS. Boom, Simon.com. In the event of some catastrophic event that wipes out the DNS, the key holders can go to ICANN's facility, use their keys to retrieve the 7 actual keys, and combine them to essentially perform a system restore on the DNS to revert it back to a previous iteration. Those are the main key holders and the 7 main keys. But as I said, there are 14 total. There are 2 ICANN facilities that each have 2 special boxes that can hold duplicate sets of the 7 keys. In the event that somehow all 4 of those boxes and their contents are destroyed, ICANN can purchase another magic box, and the backup key holders can combine their keys to program the box to produce a new set of the 7 main keys. What happens if they destroyed both places at the same time? Does that mean all the domains are gone? I just spent a lot of money on a domain. That would upset me. I'm sorry, Simon. I shouldn't have properly researched this. I should have stuck with the overly sensationalized nonsense that make this seem more interesting. The funny thing is, though, even if the DNS system, were to be destroyed somehow, it's not like the whole internet would be lost. It'd just be a much bigger pain in the arse. Every website that exists now would still exist without the DNS. It's just that to access it, you'd need to type in the actual IP address of the website rather than getting to use their domain name. So in that regard, the key holders do have an important job as trying to navigate an internet of numbers, but no names would be obnoxious. They're just not nearly as omnipotent as many sources would want you to believe. Some insects give birth to pregnant offspring. I knew this one. Like bugs and shit. Is it the bugs that live for a day? Most animals have a similar life cycle. They're born, they mature, they reproduce. Whether it's humans, elephants, or bees, this is true of pretty much everything in the animal kingdom. However, there is a rare exception to this life cycle when a mother gives birth to offspring who are already pregnant, like a Matryoshka doll of fertility. This is called telescopic generations, and it is extremely rare. The most famous example of this is the aphid. That's the one that lives for like a day, right? Though it can occur in other parthenogenic species as well. Parthenogenesis is where egg cells essentially fertilize themselves. Egg and sperm cells are each basically half of a full cell containing half the DNA, and when egg cells are created, the other half of the cell, called a polar body, is discarded and quickly decays. In parthenogenesis, however, an egg cell will combine with a polar body to create a full cell that can then grow into a full offspring. Basically, it's an asexual form of reproduction in which the mother clones herself. This isn't an ideal or sustainable way for an animal to reproduce because of the lack of genetic diversity, but it can get the job done in a pinch. When aphids reproduce through parthenogenesis, their offspring will also undergo parthenogenesis inside their mother, so they are born pregnant. But if this isn't a sustainable way to maintain a population, why do they do this? It's actually pretty simple, because insects die real quick. The lifespan of an aphid is only about a week, 1 month max. Okay, not a day, but it's pretty quick. But their sexual breeding period only takes place in the fall. Oh, so the rest of the year they're just doing this telescoping thing, and then they just get the genetic diversity once a year. So all the males are like just not getting to mate unless they have the fortune of being born in autumn. That means that in order for the species to survive long enough to mate, the female aphids need to keep cloning themselves so that they can make it until the next fall. When days start to get shorter and cooler, the aphids switch from making straight clones of themselves to producing a combination of male and female offspring so that those offspring can engage in sexual reproduction, not necessarily with each other. As weird as that is, it's not nearly as gross as the other form of telescoping generations. As the genus of mites Adacytilidium is famous for its cruel and unusual form of telescoping generations. The females will become pregnant with several offspring, 5 to 8 females and 1 male. Once the eggs hatch inside the mother, the male offspring will then fuck all of his sisters so that they're pregnant before they're even born. That's fucked up. What is happening? I know it's bugs and shit, but that's so weird. Inside?
Damn, nature, you scary.
Not that they're ever even born in the traditional sense. Once the females are pregnant, they eat their mother out. I mean, they eat their way out of their mother, obviously killing her in the process. This is super fucked up. What the fuck, bugs? And so long as you can look past the whole incest thing, being born and immediately having half a dozen females eager to breed with you seems like a pretty good deal for the male. Unfortunately, the males just die hours after this, as they never bother to leave their mother's body. They hatch, they fuck, they die. That's literally their entire life. They don't even bother to eat anything, much to the disappointment of their sisters.
Damn!
Kevin, it's bugs! Stop! Your tongue is on the roof of your mouth. No, it's not. It comes from the bottom, doesn't it? It does! I had to include this entry just for you, Simon, thanks to something that happened in a previous episode. It was probably years ago at this point, but once I mentioned that your nose is perpetually in your line of sight. Yeah, I remember this. A fun example of this is the fact that you can see your nose. Oh yeah, hello. And I'm not talking about looking down your nose and crossing your eyes. Oh, you're not? Your nose is directly in your field of vision at all times. What? Oh, it is! I mean, sort of. I can sort of see the weird shadow of my nose. Oh my god, it's really big. Holy shit, it's right there. Oh my god, my brain ignores it all the time. Holy shit, Kevin, you just blew my mind. Well, you can see your nose all the time. I'm genuinely amazed. Oh my god. Get your shit together, Simon. Come on, let's go. Yeah, okay, Kevin. Our brains are just programmed to block this out most of the time because seeing your own nose, not particularly useful. You have a pretty strong reaction to this, and it got me thinking, is there any other stimuli your body is ignoring that I can use to freak you out? Unsurprisingly, the answer is yes! There's actually a lot of it. One of my first thoughts was the human tongue. What does it do all day when you aren't paying attention to it? I was hoping it would turn out that tongues were constantly flailing around in our mouths or something. But alas, this was not the case. As it turns out, when you're not talking or eating, your tongue is usually resting pressed against the roof of your mouth. Oh yeah! Oh yeah, it'd be weird if it wasn't. It's like a good resting place for it. It's kind of got some suction going on or something.
Oh, what?
I was taken aback when I first read that, as only then did I think about my tongue and became aware of the fact that yes, the tip of my tongue was indeed pressed against the roof of my mouth behind my front teeth. Unfortunately for myself and everyone watching at home, Simon is currently talking right now. I mean, it's fortunate that the audience loves your soothing British accent, but it means that you couldn't immediately become aware of your tongue's resting position since it was otherwise occupied. Note to self, add my tongue was otherwise occupied to list of possible autobiography titles. Kevin! Anyway, it's okay that we don't get the live reaction of you discovering this. To start, the audience has already experienced it for themselves, so they know what's up. More to the point, though, you're going to experience it. After about 5 minutes you leave work today and driving home, you're going to think about this script and become deeply aware of the location of your tongue. It's probably true, but I will almost certainly forget to do this. I'll just be like listening to some podcast or something in the car, being like, do, completely oblivious to everything I learned that day. Then, based on my personal experiences after learning this, you're going to spend at least the next week periodically remembering this each time, becoming increasingly annoyed by how long it takes you to stop thinking about your tongue so you can stop feeling it. I don't think this is something that happens. I'll immediately forget about this and just be like, tongues? They touch the top of your mouth? On a related note, your body also blocks out the internal sensations of your heart beating, which makes sense. If you could feel your heart beating at all times, it would distract you from the much more important external stimuli surrounding you. However, research from 2016 showed that this same mechanism can actually cause you to block out external stimuli as well. Wait, it's just going to be a sound of hearts beating? Subjects were put in front of a screen while their heart rate was monitored, and the researchers repeatedly flashed an octagon on the screen. The control group had no problem identifying that the shape being flashed was an octagon, but when the image flashing was synced to the person's heartbeat, they not only had difficulty identifying it as an octagon, some struggled to even see that anything was appearing on the screen at all. No fucking shot. Wait, so they're timing it just when the heart goes boom, and then they flash the octagon, and if it's timed, you don't see it. That's crazy! While I personally think that's really cool and interesting, I struggle to see any way in which it could be useful. Kevin, unless you're a ninja and you're breaking into someone's palace and then you're just like listening to their heart and you only move, Kevin, when their heart beats. That makes sense. Your dreams are a surprise to you. This probably doesn't sound that shocking at first. After all, you've probably experienced things during dreams that you felt were surprising, but it does raise the question of how this could be possible. After all, a surprise is an unexpected event, fact, or thing, so how could anything in a dream come as a surprise to you if your brain is simultaneously both creating and perceiving the dream? I don't know, my brain surprises me all the time. Doesn't people's brains surprise them? You just be like, wandering along and be like, you just think of something, you'd be like, oh, holy shit, yeah, I never thought about that. And then you like write it down. That's how... Right? Admittedly, the answer is obvious, but it's not something we think about a lot. Our brains are complex organs and different parts do different things. Essentially, part of your brain creates the narrative structure of your dream and then it is displayed to another part of your brain that has no idea what's going to happen. This is possible because the part of your brain that is primarily responsible for coordinating thoughts from the rest of your brain is almost entirely shut off while you dream. That's also why your dreams often make little to zero sense. Yeah, I had a dream that I didn't have a face. And I woke up, I was like, oh God, I still have a face. Anyway, there are a couple of different theories on exactly how dreams are formed, but the prevailing theory is that dreams begin in your brainstem as random gibberish. The random signals are then sent to various areas of the forebrain that I'm not going to bother to list because it would just be a long string of science words like forebrain dopaminergic systems. Yes, the dopaminergic system. Very familiar. That will only confuse the issue. Anyway, so dreams start as random signals in the brainstem. They then travel to the forebrain, which tries to turn the random input into something vaguely coherent. I say vaguely coherent because, well, you've dreamed before. You know that dreams rarely make sense. Once the narrative structure is created, it is then sent to your visual and sensory cortices so you can experience the events as if they're happening. The signal is also sent to your limbic system, which controls emotion to make sure everything feels real and meaningful. Yeah, it's like, oh my God, my dream means... No. Your dream means nothing. You had the weird signals in your brainstem that the brain's like, ugh. And then you're like, oh, dreams mean things. They don't. They don't mean things. The fact that I dreamt I didn't have a face means nothing. People will be like, well, actually, Simon, if you dream that you don't have a face, it means that Mercury is in retro... No. Stop. And all of this is possible because your prefrontal cortex is in a mostly inactive state while you're asleep. Because the prefrontal cortex is responsible for higher function and decision making, by necessity, it is the part that coordinates the rest of your brain. And since it's not there to ensure everyone is working together, your brain is capable of genuinely surprising itself with a story that it also wrote. The only downside is that because the prefrontal cortex is also responsible for logical reasoning, there's nothing in place to ensure that our dreams make logical sense or even obey the laws of physics. Yeah, I love that movie. Leonardo DiCaprio, The Buildings Fall, Inception. Inception. That was a cool movie. Unfortunately, while it's cool that we're pretty sure we know exactly how and why our brains are able to surprise themselves when we're asleep, we still have absolutely no idea why we sleep or dream. According to William Dement, the co-discoverer of REM sleep and founder of the Sleep Research Center at Stanford University, as far as I know, the only reason we need to sleep is because we get sleepy. And that was his take after 60 years of research. Yeah, sleep's such a fucking mystery. Trees caused mass extinction simply by existing. Fucking trees, man. Genocidal fucks. There have been 5 mass extinction events over the past 500 million years or so. The most famous of these is, of course, the Cretaceous Paleogene event. Paleocene? It says Paleogene, but I feel like that's Paleocene? But I could be entirely wrong. Probably am wrong. Kevin, writes and researches for a living. I just read shit on a teleprompter. That occurred about 66 million years ago. This wasn't the largest extinction event in Earth's history by any means, but it's the most famous because this is the one that killed off all the bloody dinosaurs. It's well established that the extinction of the dinosaurs was caused by a large meteor, and we generally think of mass extinctions resulting from some sort of cataclysmic event like meteors or volcanoes. However, newer evidence has changed science's outlook on some of these events, particularly the late Devonian mass extinction, which was the second of the mass extinction events. The late Devonian extinction is actually made up of 2 smaller extinction events, both categorized by falling temperatures. I thought I was going to say that. Both categorized by falling trees. Fucking trees, man. They're out to get you. The first event was much more deadly, though it was a much smaller drop in temperature. It's just that by the time the second event occurred, most of the life that was dependent on warmer temperatures was already dead anyway. Oh, thank God. So, to give you an idea of just how cold it got, the glacial ice caps extended all the way to within 30 degrees of the equator, possibly even closer. Holy shit. For a long time, the drop in temperature was some like Snowpiercer shit. It was blamed on massive volcanic activity blocking out the sun and creating a sort of nuclear winter, kind of like the year without summer. However, the newer research shows this extinction event likely had a much less spectacular culprit: trees. Before the Denovian period, Earth's landscape was a barren wasteland. There was a bunch of bacteria hanging around and doing its thing, but there were no terrestrial plants or animals. All complex life forms were relegated to the water or extremely close to it. It was during this period, about 400 million years ago, when the first vertebrates began to walk on land. It was also at this time that the first trees came into being. Plant life had existed in the ocean for millions of years, but any plants that didn't live in the water either lived on rocks jutting out of the water or just along the shoreline. It wasn't until the Denovian period that plants made their biggest evolutionary leap by developing roots. Large root systems allowed plants to thrive in areas with less moisture, as it let them grow to massive new heights, whereas the tallest plants in the world had previously only reached 30 centimeters. Can you imagine going back in time and you'd be like, oh, let's go explore the jungle? It's like, fuck, why are all the plants so small? Trees were now growing to be 30 meters tall. That's a hell of a difference. For my American compatriots, Kevin's, not mine, who refused to learn the metric system, that is 100 times taller. Wait, that's not helpful. Plants literally jump from being a foot tall to 100 feet tall. That's helpful. Thanks to the development of roots. Utilizing hard seeds that trapped in moisture instead of relying on spores also allowed seeds to spread further, and soon trees were overtaking the entire landscape. That was great for the trees, but as it turns out, it was disastrous for all other life on Earth. Roots would break down rock sediment in a process called weathering. Weathering removes nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus from rocks, which was beneficial to the trees. However, a lot of these excess nutrients would get carried by rainfall into the ocean, where it was much less beneficial. Extremophiles that evolved only to survive in low-nutrient environments died off because of all the extra nutrients being introduced into the water. More importantly, the nutrients fueled the rapid growth of enormous algae blooms. The increase in algae resulted in an increase in algae-eating bacteria that were necessary for the decomposition of the algae. In fact, they had used up all the oxygen in the ocean, causing the death of any aquatic life beneath these algae blooms. Fucking trees ruining everything. There was also so much algae that it would sink to the ocean floor before it had decomposed, and the bacteria would fall down with it, sucking up all the oxygen and killing all life on the ocean floor like trilobites. Fuck it.
I don't think any of us expected him to say that.
And because there were all these giant trees that sprung out of nowhere to cover the land masses of the Earth, they began sucking up all of the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
Suck.
Oh no! I know that's, obviously, it's bad, but we could really use some of that right now. It is believed that this, more than any potential volcanic activity, is what caused the temperatures on Earth to fall, which of course resulted in the deaths of a lot of species. Most of the death was relegated to the oceans, but things weren't great for the animals that had grown limbs and were now living on land either. There wasn't a major threat to their survival, assuming they could survive the dropping temperatures, but there wasn't really anywhere for them to live and expand their populations to either. You know that when things die, they decompose and go back to the earth, the whole circle of life and all of that. But what we really don't think about is how important bacteria is to the process of decomposition. Trees were a brand new thing though, so there weren't bacteria that were able to break them down yet. Instead, all the trees that died and fell to the ground just kind of piled up indefinitely, taking up valuable real estate that could have been used by terrestrial animals. Oh my god, I'd never thought about that. If there's nothing to break down the trees are just going to grow and then die and pile and pile and pile. There's trees everywhere. On the bright side, though, these piles of dead trees would go on to become some of the world's first coal deposits, so that's cool. It is cool. It is cool. It really is cool. Oh yes, and while I said there have been 5 mass extinction events, many scientists believe we are currently in the midst of a 6th mass extinction event caused by human activity. If that's the case, at least we can take solace in knowing that we aren't the first terrestrial species to cause a mass extinction event. Just the first that should have known better. I don't know, Kevin. Maybe the trees should have known, Kevster. Not all anesthesia stops you from feeling pain. I knew this. Anesthesia's wild. I am very fortunate to have never needed a surgery in my life, especially because I was born at a time when giving anesthesia to babies wasn't common practice. Thanks to some faulty research and misunderstandings, people didn't think babies could feel pain. I knew this as well.
Humans are dumb.
It was believed that a baby's nervous system wasn't yet developed enough to feel pain. And even if they did feel pain, who cares? They were babies. It's not like they're going to remember, but their brains will remember the trauma. They will. And that's why... I don't know what the consequences of this. I was going to say, that's why we have serial killers, but obviously that's not true because there's still serial killers who are, you know what I'm talking about. Instead of anesthesia, babies were given muscle relaxants to keep them from squirming during surgery. It wasn't until 1987 that
You what?
Fortunately, the year I was born, that the American Academy of Pediatrics formally declared that performing surgery on infants without anesthesia was unethical, and even then, anesthesia didn't become standard for a while. That sounds incredibly fucked up, but apparently doctors believed they were onto something, not with the whole babies don't feel pain thing, but with the idea that if they didn't remember the pain, then who cares? Kind of the deal with anesthesia, in a way, you will see. In fact, that is the entire basis of a number of modern anesthetics, including the most commonly used general anesthesia, propofol. Rather than preventing pain, propofol and other amnesic anesthetics cause anterior grade amnesia, meaning they prevent the formation of future memories. They hook you up to an IV, you count back from 10, and then you don't remember anything that happened between that moment and when the drug wears off. Right, but isn't propofol just part of is it a 3-part cocktail that you get? Because you get the thing that makes you go to sleep, you get the paralytic that keeps you from moving, and then you get a painkiller to stop you from feeling pain, right? It's 3 things. It's not just propofol, so you don't remember anything. That means you can still feel the pain of whatever procedure happened, you just won't remember it. Admittedly, amnesic drugs are usually paired with painkillers as well, there we go, but usually means that isn't always the case. If a procedure is going to be painful, but not painful enough to warrant other drugs, an amnesiac anesthetic can be used alone, which I think is fundamentally fucked. Yeah, that's pretty fucked up. I don't think they should be doing that. I always assumed it was those 3 drugs working in tandem. I'm sure you disagree with me on that, Simon, so let me give you a little scenario. No, I agree with you, Kevin. Why would I disagree with you? I'd be like, give me the fucking drugs, dude. I don't care if I don't remember. I don't want my non-remembering self to be fucking cut open and feel that. Let's say I chop your dick off and then sew it back on. Jesus Christ, Kevin.
Why would you do that?
There's no visible scarring, everything still works the way it's supposed to, and you have no memory of any of this taking place. Are you okay with this happening? No, Kevin. I realise that's a ridiculous scenario, and I would never chop your dick off. Thank you. I don't know why I'm thanking you for that, Kevin, but thanks. If for no other reason than my sewing skills are limited to reattaching buttons to a shirt or a pair of slacks, can't even do that. But I still think the point stands. That said, I'm still anticipating some pushback from you on this one. Why would I push back on you on that one? I'd be like, of course people should get the drugs. Jesus Christ, I love drugs. While I personally think it's unacceptable to allow someone to experience mild to moderate pain under an amnesic anesthetic...
Say that 10 times fast!
Fuck, man, these words. Anesthetic. I suspect this is going to be one of those rare instances where you and I are not on the same. Why do you think this so much? It's like the third time you've told me that I should believe in having people who are unconscious feel pain. What sort of psycho do you think I am, Kevster?
Don't answer that.
And you don't think it matters what's going on if you're not going to remember it anyway. To that end, I eagerly await your ad read for Tate Gummies, Romania's #1 fans of Rohypnol. Boom! Kevin and I are on the same page on that one as well. You lose excess weight by exhaling it. I knew this! You exhale, the fat's broken down, is it carbon dioxide or some shit like that, and then you breathe it out? Like, which, when you think about it, does make sense. Weight loss has become a massive industry. In 2024, it was worth about $163 billion, and that number is expected to double by 2034. Except Weight Watchers go under, and whoever makes Monjano starts, like, making that money. Imagine my surprise when I discovered that the way humans lose weight is simply by breathing.
Oh, if only it were that simple.
A lot of people have this concept that your body burns off fat, converting it into energy. I'd say this is a colloquial oversimplification of the process, but apparently a lot of doctors genuinely believe this as well. I mean, I guess that's what I would have thought until I learned this fact a while ago. It's also not entirely wrong, but it ignores the conservation of matter. Most fat in your body is made up of triglycerides that are stored in your fat cells. When you have a calorie deficit and need energy, your body can break the chemical bonds of the triglycerides to release energy which powers your body. In this regard, you are burning the fat to produce energy, but the components hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon atoms that made up those triglycerides don't cease to exist. They are still in your body. What I had been taught and believed to be true for the past 25 years or so was that when fat is converted to energy, the resulting waste product has to be peed out. And that made a lot of sense. Your body was getting energy from your fat cells and then removing that mass from your body. However, a 2014 study out of Australia revealed that the water created by breaking down triglycerides only accounts for about 16% of weight loss. The other 84% gets exhaled in the form of carbon dioxide. Boom, I have a giant brain. Yes, thank you. I'll take a bow. This wasn't even new science either. While the process of fat being broken down and removed from the body was understood, it turns out nobody had bothered to actually do the maths. As far as I could tell, it was just assumed that the vast majority of weight was excreted in urine and that the amount exhaled was negligible because that's what makes intuitive sense. Yeah, but no, we put out a surprising amount of fluid, liquid through our breath and stuff. Of course, this probably wouldn't be as surprising if schools taught us more about plants. In an episode of Shocking Science Facts over on Side Projects, I explained that plants gain nearly all of their mass by breathing in carbon dioxide, not from absorbing nutrients from the ground. Since I learned this, and I know it's insane that I didn't know this, because plants are with a carbon-based life. Of course it comes from carbon dioxide, not from, soil and water and all of this stuff. I have presented this as a fact to smart people. I'll be like, what are trees made of? And they'll be like, they get this stuff from the soil. I'll be like, no, it comes from carbon dioxide. And they're like, oh yeah, I love this. It's so obvious and so just not thought about. It is one of my favorite facts. If we acknowledge that to be true, then humans removing mass by exhaling carbon dioxide doesn't sound quite as ridiculous, though I was still really surprised by it. That all said, you can't just make yourself hyperventilate in an attempt to lose weight. Fuck.
See? I knew there's a catch. There's always a catch.
If your body doesn't need to break down the triglycerides in your fat cells for energy, you can't force it to do so just by breathing extra hard. None of this changes what you have to do in order to lose weight. It's just wild to think that you lose vastly more of your body mass by exhaling than you do by excreting it as waste. I am not so surprised by this because I think about the amount of food that I consume and then I think about the size of my shits. And it's like, well, it's going somewhere. I'm not putting on a ton of weight. It's going somewhere. And I just kind of see them sweating it out or breathing it out, pissing out a bit, I guess. It's going somewhere, right? Solid objects rarely burn. Everyone who has ever been camping knows you can't just start a fire using giant logs, as convenient as that would be. I start fires with giant logs. I've got a fireplace. I'll take in some logs and I'll just put firelighters. I know. Obviously it's firelighters, but I'm not doing the kindling thing. I get a massive log, get a fuckload of firelighters, set those fuckers alight, and eventually that log's catching fire.
That's how the cavemen did it.
You have to start with tinder and kindling to get the fire large enough to burn fuel like wooden logs. From an extremely technical and pedantic standpoint, however, you aren't actually burning the log because most solid organic materials can't burn. When you burn a solid object like a log, what's actually happening is something called pyrolysis. This is when, in the absence of oxygen, heat breaks down the chemical bonds of the solid, causing it to release gases. It is those gases, rather than the solid object itself, that you actually see burning. And I know that fire requires oxygen, but the oxygen is all being consumed by the fire, so the wood itself gets deprived of oxygen, allowing pyrolysis to take place. Following so far. The exception to this would be objects that are mostly or entirely made of carbon, which is pretty much just charcoal and its byproducts like coke. Not that Coke, Simon. Or that other Coke, Simon. No fun. Charcoal smells 70 to 90% carbon, and the impurities actually help it burn more easily at lower temperatures. For pure carbon, like graphite or diamonds, it takes extreme temperatures to make them burn, about 800 degrees Celsius for graphite and 1,000 for diamonds. It's going to be really expensive fire. When you got there, 1,000 degrees, burn those diamonds, baby! But yes, diamonds are technically flammable. I realize that this whole solid objects don't burn thing seems like a distinction without a difference, since logs can certainly seem to burn in your campfire, but that's only because we live in a world where this has always been the case. While it doesn't seem like it makes a meaningful difference, it's worth noting that fires would look remarkably different if solid objects were able to burn. To start, there would be no flames. Flames are produced by burning gases. Oh yeah, think like when you have like a shisha pipe, right? Which I used to smoke shisha pipes and then I stopped because it's horrible for you. But smoking a shisha pipes is so nice. But you put that charcoal block on top, right, and you light it. And it's burning and it's heating everything up, but there's no flame. It just like kind of glows. Flames are produced by burning gases, so if you're actually able to burn a log without pyrolysis, it wouldn't look like a fire in the traditional sense. It would kind of just glow like charcoal. There would also be very little smoke or scent released by the fire, and it would be almost completely silent. The crackling of a fire occurs when water inside the log is converted to steam, expanding and causing little wood fibers to split. That I did know. If the log was burning directly instead of being broken down into gas first, this would not happen. Basically, if solid objects were able to burn directly, everything we know and love about fires would cease to exist, making them far less cool and interesting. I think the thing I love about fire most is it makes heat. Like, you're going camping and there's a fire, and yeah, sure, it's like nice to have a fire and stuff, but mostly especially like winter or whatever, mostly I'm just glad to have a fire, because then I'm less cold. There would be some upsides though, as without burning gases that are easily blown around by the wind, wildfires would have a much harder time spreading. There would also certainly be a major drop in pyromania as well, because burning stuff just wouldn't be as cool anymore.
I just torched a building downtown and I'm afraid I'll do it again.
Oh, yeah, right. I'll just type it up on my invisible typewriter. Dum-dum-dum-dum. Fruitcake.
Yeah, I fucking love burning shit. I'm like a pyromaniac. Not like a criminal one, but like I love burning shit. Like, I'll go camping, I'll make a fuck-off massive fire. Polar bears are nearly invisible on infrared. I knew this one as well. This actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it. It's just not the sort of thing that people think about. If you've ever seen images of a person or other animal taken with infrared, they stand out quite a bit. That's because our bodies give off heat in the form of infrared radiation, and these cameras are designed to pick up on that radiation. Specifically, they detect the contrast between the infrared radiation given off by an object and its surroundings. The thing is, though, polar bears live in the Arctic, where it's cold as shit. They don't want to give off their heat because they need it to live. So they don't give it off, thanks to a combination of thick blubber, dense fur, and black skin. Oh yeah, they do have black skin underneath the white fur that more efficiently absorbs heat from the sun. Polar bears are specifically designed to take in the heat and keep it in. As a result, they are extremely difficult, though not impossible, to see with an infrared camera. The only parts of a polar bear that don't appear to seamlessly blend into their surroundings on the infrared are their eyes, mouths, and paw pads. Even then, though, they can be extremely difficult to spot if you aren't really zoomed in on their location. With a larger infrared panorama, it can be nearly impossible to identify where there are polar bears, if any. But hey, if you're ever in the Arctic looking through infrared goggles, at least you'll be able to see the polar bear's eyes, mouth, and front paws as it lunges at you to maul you to death for food. That's not going to help you survive, but at least you won't die in a state of confusion wondering what attacked you. Or just use your eyes. Like, I know infrared's cool and all that, but if it's just better visible in the visible spectrum, just use your eyes. Just use your eyes. You don't need that infrared. Don't even bring it with you. Genghis Khan may have personally delayed the Renaissance for centuries. Our next entry today is a reminder that fuck around and find out is meant as a warning, not advice. And that goes double when you're dealing with someone like Genghis Khan. The year was 1218, and Genghis Khan was deeply embroiled in a war with the Jin dynasty in North China. It was during this time that Genghis decided to attempt to open relations with one of its neighbors, the Khwarezmian Empire. This empire covered large parts of Central Asia, Afghanistan, and Iran, and had been undergoing a rapid expansion. But perhaps more important than their territorial expansion was the expansion of knowledge taking place in the Khwarezmian Empire. Building off the Islamic Golden Age, there was a lot of scholarly pursuits, particularly involving the incorporation of classical Western teachings into their art, science, and philosophy. And it was right around 1218 when some of this knowledge began being traded with the Europeans along the Silk Road. Now, for anyone unaware, since this part isn't adequately explained in American schools, the Renaissance... You don't get explained the Renaissance? It was the rediscovery and revival of classical Greek and Roman culture and ideas with the goal of then surpassing them. However, the Europeans didn't just find a bunch of lost books lying around because all of that shit had long since been destroyed. Instead, all of these classical works and ideas had to make their way back to Europe by way of the Islamic world, where they had been studying and building upon these works for centuries. And in 1218, that was just beginning to happen. Granted, there were some other prerequisites for the Renaissance, such as the invention of the printing press, which allowed the revival of classical ideas to be a broad societal thing rather than relegated purely to wealthy intellectuals, but getting the information back there in the first place would still be a pretty big step. But that's when someone made perhaps the dumbest decision I've ever read in my entire life. Let's go. And I'm the one who told you about a guy who died after supergluing his penis shut because he didn't have a condom. That is special. I forgot about that. Anyway, Genghis Khan sent a large caravan of merchants backed by Mongolia's wealthy elite to Khwarezmia. They arrived at the city of Otrar, where the governor, Inalchuk, let's just call him Chucky, decided that the merchants were actually Mongolian spies, seized all of their goods and executed them. This was a pretty stupid idea, and it got worse. Genghis was already pretty involved with his war against the Jin dynasty, and he wasn't looking for another one. He had actually been hoping to open trade routes and possibly form a genuine alliance with the Khwarezmian Empire. Killing his merchants was idiotic, but it wasn't unforgivable. I mean, it was unforgivable for Chucky. Genghis very much wanted him dead, but it was unclear if the Shah of the Khwarezmian Empire, Muhammad II, had played any role in this decision. Wanting to remain diplomatic, Genghis sent an envoy of 3 ambassadors to speak with the Shah. They basically said, look, the merchants weren't a trick, we really just want to be friends, and we still can be, but you're also going to need to hand over Chucky to us as judgment because what he did was pretty fucked up. Bro, those guys, those ambassadors, the 3 of them, they're getting killed. They're 100% getting killed. That was a completely fair message, and honestly much more even-handed than I'd expect from one of history's most notorious warmongers. Needless to say, Muhammad II decided the best course of action was to kill the ambassadors. Of course, what did you expect? Even though Genghis believed that his ambassadors were as sacred and inviolable as he was. And that may be the single stupidest thing I've ever heard. Yeah, this is a little bit before the Vienna Convention, mate. So yes, remember when I said that the Mongols were at war with the Jin dynasty? Well, not anymore, they weren't. Genghis withdrew virtually all of his troops, marched towards Khwarezmia, and fucked them up for good. As many as 10 to 15 million were killed, and complete cities were leveled, including Bukhara, Samarkand, and Nishapur, which were the intellectual capitals of the empire. With the destruction of these cities, the flow of classical Western ideas back to Europe slowed dramatically, potentially delaying the Renaissance by centuries. But speaking of Mongolia, idiots in Mongolia keep dying of the plague. Look, I realize it's probably disrespectful to refer to the dead as idiots. I'm very happy to refer to people who are idiots and are dead as idiots. I mean, it's just what they were. People will call me an idiot after I'm dead, like they call me an idiot now. Fair play to you. Fair play. But I can't help but feel that it is appropriate in this particular case. Now, you're all familiar with the Black Death, a horrific plague that wiped out anywhere between 30 and 50% of the entire population of Europe. It was a horrible disease caused by the bacteria Yersinia pestis. Actually, it wasn't just one disease. Depending on where the bacteria winds up, it can cause 3 different diseases: bubonic plague, pneumonic plague, and septicemic plague. Now, most cases in the Black Death were the bubonic variety. Yeah, because it's also got the name the bubonic plague, but the others were still possible. Fortunately, because Yersinia pestis is a bacteria, we have antibiotics to treat it, so long as the infection is caught early enough. The United States averages about 7 cases of the plague every year. It's like, what to you? Oh, I got the Black Plague. I'm fine. But shit, I got the bubonic plague. But there have only been 16 deaths since 2000. That's still an unfortunate amount, but it's less than 1 per year, so clearly the treatment is very effective. And no shade to people who contract the plague by no fault of their own. Thanks to things like improved sanitation and efforts to control the population of rodents and fleas, the number of cases has dramatically plummeted since the pandemic of the 1300s. But sometimes shit happens, and people can still contract the plague completely by accident out in the wild. However, that's not what's happening in Mongolia. There's an animal that lives there called the tarbagan marmot, and the plague is endemic among the species. Worst of all, these marmots carry the pneumonic plague. That's the most contagious form by virtue of being airborne, and it also is the deadliest. Oh shit. I'm glad the bubonic plague wasn't the pneumonic plague, otherwise there'd just be no one left in Europe. Without treatment, it has a near 100% fatality rate, with death occurring just 24 to 72 hours after exposure. God damn that disease. This is clearly not something you want to mess around with, and it's also not a new problem. The plague has been endemic among the marmots for decades, and yet every single year there is at least 1 plague death in Mongolia because somebody ate a raw marmot. What are you doing? What are you doing? Don't eat it if it's got the fucking plague. And if you're going to eat it if it's got the plague, just fucking cook it at least. Jesus. This happens despite the fact that eating the marmots is well known to be illegal and that there are annual announcements not to eat the marmots because you will die of the plague. Everybody knows these things, they simply don't care because raw marmot is seen as a delicacy. Okay, now I see. Maybe this is one of those delicacies like fugu that is delicacy specifically because of the risk of death rather than because of anything related to its taste. But with fugu, at least it's a calculated risk, and the majority of people who die were amateurs who improperly prepared their own meal. What you doing? In Japan, one of the requirements to get your license to prepare and sell fugu is to eat a plate of fugu you personally prepared, so it's pretty safe to say that the people selling it know what they're doing. With these goddamn marmots, though, it's literally just a roll of the dice. Unless you happen to catch one in the act of sneezing the plague into another marmot's face, there's little way to know that the meal you're about to eat will kill you or not. And even if the animal was infected, Yersinia pestis is not heat resistant. If they properly cooked the meat instead of eating it raw, they'd probably be fine. Nah, I still wouldn't eat it, though. I'll be like, hard pass. Just in case. Now look, if this was a case of impoverished people hunting marmots out of desperation and getting sick from undercooking them, I'd be way more sympathetic. Yeah, but it's a delicacy. But the fact that this is happening because raw marmot is considered a delicacy is utterly insane. It's especially bad because all the human outbreaks are of pneumonic plague, so if someone ate a marmot and then coughed in your general direction while walking down the street, suddenly you would be at risk of dying from the plague as well. So not only is it suicidal, it's also selfish. This is a sentence I could never imagined I would be writing in 2025, but here we are. The first person to calculate the height of Mount Everest lied.
I know this one.
In 1802, the British began the Great Trigonometrical Survey of India. It was an effort to calculate the heights of all mountains on the Indian subcontinent with the greatest level of scientific accuracy possible. To do this, they used massive... They're just going down there to measure them. Will this fit in the British Museum? To do this, they use massive theodolites, which are those camera-looking things you see surveyors using. Oh shit, now I know. But instead of being easily portable like the ones you see being used by your local DPW? Department of Public Works. Took a minute or something. These theodolites weighed 1,100 pounds. It's like a ton. A bit more than a ton. Each, and took 12 men to carry. Yeah, no shit, it weighs a ton. Needless to say, they were taking this effort seriously, and in the late 1840s, Andrew Scott Waugh, the Surveyor General of India, made a peculiar observation. At the time, it was believed that Kanchenjunga was the tallest mountain peak in the world, but he noticed another peak about 230 kilometers away that appeared to be even taller. The peak would later become known as Mount Everest, and it would take 9 years from the initial observation to finally announce the mountain's height. There were a lot of factors that slowed progress, such as weather conditions, malaria, killing off or hospitalizing the surveyors, and the refusal of the Nepalese and Tibetan people to allow any foreigners into their land for any reason. In 1852, the first calculations were completed, but they had to be checked and verified over and over again. According to the numbers, this new mountain was even taller than Kanchenjunga, so everyone had to be positive the calculations were correct before going public. It wasn't until 1856 that Andrew finally announced that the mountain, then known as Peak 15, was most probably the highest in the world. But when he made this announcement, he lied about the mountainside. I don't mean the number they calculated was wrong. Andrew deliberately lied about how tall Everest was, but why would he do this? Was it not really the tallest peak in the world, but he wanted the notoriety for making a new discovery anyway? What is his reason?
For reasons that are utterly stupid and feeble.
No, it wasn't something so nefarious. Andrew lied simply because nobody would have believed the truth. According to the calculations that they had spent 4 years rechecking to ensure they were accurate, Mount Everest was exactly 29,000 feet tall. Oh, geez, that's super interesting. If he said they identified a new tallest mountain in the world and that its height was a round number, people would have dismissed the claim as just being an estimate or the result of rounding. So Andrew lied, instead claiming that the mountain was 29,002 feet. It's reminiscent of the brain blaze when we talked about pricing tricks companies play, like charm pricing, or in this case, oddly specific numbers. Yeah, the oddly specific numbers thing is incredible. I use this in negotiations all the time. Just like, I was thinking that 2,491 would be a fair price. Like you've really thought about it. And I know people must see through this, but it's surprisingly effective. And speaking of that, why not pick up a Brainblaze signed script from the archive when I used to do them? You can buy them for $103.42. I was just doing the sums in my head to make, calculating the ink and the printer costs and all of this stuff. So you're getting it really specific and correct. I think they're actually $100. You can pick one up online if you want to. There's a link below. And because of this little act of deceit, there's a long-standing joke that Andrew was the first man to put 2 feet on top of Mount Everest. No. A US court admitted a deepfake of a murder victim. This happened just last week at the time of writing, and it was a huge bit of news in the United States. I'm guessing it didn't make it all the way to Simon, though, so this, or you didn't, will be a fun and bizarre story that could also be a frightening portent of things to come. In 2021, 37-year-old Chris Pelkey was shot and killed during a road rage incident in Chandler, Arizona. The exact details of what pissed the two men off originally aren't terribly clear, but something happened while they were driving that resulted in some amount of rage. When they stopped at a red light, 50-year-old Gabriel Casitas honked his horn at Chris, who was driving the car in front of him. Chris got out of his car and started walking towards Gabriel in his car, reportedly yelling at him, "Do you want a piece of me?" Gabriel then opened fire and shot Chris multiple times, even though Chris was unarmed. Chris was then rushed to a nearby hospital where he died from his wounds. When the trial finally concluded this year, Gabriel was convicted of manslaughter. All that was left was the sentencing hearing, which is when things got really weird. What is going to happen? At a sentencing hearing, the victim and other people affected by the incident are allowed to make what are called impact statements. Please don't tell me that they're making an AI version of the victim to talk about how he was shot. That would be so cringe and inappropriate. Please, no.
Spoilers.
This allows them to explain the cost they have suffered as a result of crime, monetary or otherwise, in an attempt to influence the judge's decision about the verdict. The convicted person is usually also given the chance to speak as well, ideally to express remorse. Impact statements can come in a variety of forms, be they written, videotaped, or spoken orally in court. They can also express a lot of different sentiments. Some victims may argue for leniency, while others may claim that they will never feel safe again unless the convicted is behind bars forever. And judges can choose to either change their decision based on these statements or just ignore them entirely. In Chris's case, however, one of the impact statements was not only unusual, it was unprecedented. His sister had been trying to write her feelings, which were largely to just throw the book at Gabriel, but she was struggling to find the words. Instead, she decided to write down what she thought Chris would have said. Oh no, she did it. Oh, I hate this. I hate this. And look, that sort of thing isn't uncommon. In instances of manslaughter or murder, impact statements will often include what someone thought the victim would have said. This doesn't feel appropriate either. However, instead of just including those thoughts in her own statement, she used AI trained on a single photo of Chris and a YouTube video he made talking about PTSD from his time in the military to create a virtual avatar of Chris to read the script she wrote in his voice. Basically, a judge let her create a deepfake of Chris so that he could speak at the sentencing for his own murder.
Hello. Just to be clear for everyone seeing this, I am a version of Chris Pelkey recreated through AI that uses my picture and my voice profile. I was able to be digitally regenerated to share with you today. But here is insight into who I actually was in real life. Take a look.
Needless to say, the overwhelming majority of people are in agreement that this is beyond fucked up. Granted, the AI video wasn't used in evidence for conviction and was only part of the sentencing hearing, but it's still completely fucked. It's not like they fed an AI every text message and DM that Chris had ever written and used that to construct what they believed he would have said. His sister just wrote a script and had a computer rendering of Chris's voice read the script to the court. This is so fucking weird, America, and somehow the most American thing ever, but please stop. This is some seriously dystopian shit that we're dealing with, and I pray this sort of thing doesn't become common in courts in the United States. Yeah. But the weirdest part of this was the effect it had on the sentence. Chris's witness statement, that was written by his sister, was 4 minutes long and was about how unfortunate what had happened was and how he thought he and Gabriel could have been friends in a different life. How would you know? He honked at you, you got out in anger, shouted at him, and he shot you. Above all, though, it was about God and forgiveness and how Chris forgave his killer. As a side note, if something like this ever happens to me and anyone tries to convince you that I forgive my killer, they're a fucking liar. Agreed, Kevster. I don't forgive and I don't forget. That sounds fucking psycho. I don't care if I instigated the fight and I'm completely in the wrong. If someone shoots me while I'm unarmed, I would absolutely not forgive them. I would make it my mission to personally drag them to hell with me, or barring that, drive them insane by haunting them relentlessly until they die. Anyway, the judge was extremely moved by what was presented as Chris's statement and his ability to forgive Gabriel. Judge? What are you doing? He was so moved, in fact, that he sentenced Gabriel to 10.5 years in prison, a full year longer than the prosecution had even been asking for. Wait. So he was moved by it to the extent of like, yeah, fuck that, you're going to prison for longer. I'm not sure what's more concerning, that the judge allowed this nonsense to transpire in the first place, or that he thought the victim's moving speech about forgiveness was a reason to give a harsher sentence. Holy shit. Maybe the judge had just kind of assumed Chris was kind of an asshole, but after seeing what a nice God-fearing man he was, the judge decided that the death of such a good-hearted Christian deserved a more severe punishment. You know, like Jesus would have wanted. Dominant and recessive genes. Now, everyone who took middle school or high school biology has at least a basic understanding of how dominant and recessive traits work. Is this the thing about the Punnett squares, which are kind of mostly bullshit? Everyone is born with 2 copies of each gene, one inherited from each parent. Since your parents also had 2 copies of each gene, they each gave you one of theirs at random. What traits the offspring expresses depend on what genes they were given. If both parents gave the gene for brown eyes, then the kid has brown eyes. If both gave the gene for blue eyes, then the kid has blue eyes. And if parents give one brown and one blue eye, then the dominant trait is the one that will get expressed, in this case brown eyes. Of course, for a lot of things, it's more complicated than that. Eye color isn't a binary choice, and it's also influenced by dozens of genes in varying degrees, not a single one. But the general principle for genetic dominance of traits still stands. It only takes one copy of the dominant gene for that to be the trait that's expressed. Now, at this point, you're probably thinking, well, so what, Kevin? We know all of this already. And to that, I say, calm the fuck down, because I wanted to end this episode with something that I hoped would truly shock Simon, as well as the majority of the audience. I'm waiting for it, Kevster. Yes, we all know how dominant and recessive genes work, but there are a couple of traits I guarantee you that you would not have guessed were dominant. Let's go, okay? For example, did you know that having extra fingers or toes is a dominant trait?
Hey, Bart, according to this magazine, in another million years, man will have an extra finger.
5 fingers? Ooh, freak show.
I feel like I know the webbing thing is, because otherwise it would just be gone, right? Not only is this true, it's an excellent example of how a trait being dominant doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be common. If having 6 fingers on one hand made someone irresistibly sexy or dramatically increased their lifespan, things that would allow them to procreate more than their contemporaries, maybe they're also just wicked good at guitar and therefore get laid more when they're playing around the campfire with their, 6 fucking fingers. Then the trait would likely get passed on and proliferate through the majority of the population, but neither of those things are true. Extra digits usually are not fully formed. Instead, they're often tiny and in the way. I had a teacher in college who had 6 fingers, but the extra one came in the form of 2 thumbs that were basically fused together. Ugh. I don't want to laugh at this. I shouldn't say that. Oh no, that's bad. It's a disability, and I'm just like, gross. Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to hell.
Digging a hole. Let's move on. The only thing this was useful for was distracting the entire class, ensuring that nobody learned a thing once we all realized he had 2 thumbs on one hand. Having bonus fingers or toes is also generally considered gross rather than exotic, thus decreasing the chance of the gene being passed on. Okay, Kevin called it gross as well. Or he said it's widely regarded as. Sure. That said, polydactyly, the scientific name for extra digits, is a lot more common than most people realize. According to Boston Children's Hospital, between 1 in 1,000 and 1 in 500 babies are born with an extra finger or toe. It's just me, or do they clip them off? Am I imagining that? Another trait that you probably wouldn't have guessed is dominant is, oh my, achondroplasia. Granted, you wouldn't have guessed that's a dominant trait because you have no idea what that word means, but that's beside the point. Achondroplasia is the most common form of dwarfism, and it is indeed a dominant trait. That also means that if 2 people with this type of dwarfism have a child, there is up to a 25% chance that the child will receive 2 copies of the recessive gene, thus growing up to be average size, or maybe even exceptionally tall. I was really hoping there would be some other unbelievable examples of dominant traits, like having a 3-foot cock or something, but these were the most surprising examples I could find. So, I guess that's where we end today's episode, with Simon talking about a 3-foot cock. Yes. Seriously though, that's way too big. The tailoring bill alone would be out of control. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Kevin. I'll see you next time. That's it. Whoever's editing this, make that AI shit. Make a picture of a dolphin climbing a tree.
Do I have to?